I think that the investment in women-owned companies is still 2%. Corporate America has made some strides forward, but not enough. So the only number I see growing is the amount of women starting businesses. And that's really exciting, but we have to be able to provide them with the education and support and community. My hope is that if these businesses succeed, these female-founded companies will pay their women better. They will support their communities more. They will give women the proper maternity leaves and or lactation support, postpartum support they need. That will have a ripple effect that I hope in the next decade is quantifiable.
Rebecca, it's such a pleasure to have you and see you again and coming on Business Innovators. You've been up to so much since we last spoke. It's been a few years, and I just wanted to welcome you onto Business Innovators and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being patient with my unrealistic and chaotic schedule.
No worries. I'm just glad that I got you right now, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to talk to you because your story is incredible, as we know, and just some of the things you've been involved with as of late as well. But really, I want to go back to the beginning and talk to you about growing up and really tell us where you grew up and were there influences early in your life that you knew you'd become this, incredible entrepreneur?
I think that the influences I had growing up at the time didn't sort of, I don't think you ever consciously think this is an influence. But we lived in San Diego. My mom had her own Amway business. She also was selling things at the flea market. And I just got excited about the idea that I could make something too and sell it. And so I just remember very early on making my own puffy paint sweatshirts, spin art. And I'd set up a little card table at the flea market and no one bought anything, which was tough. But it was just the idea that I could do that every week. Or I would go to the jewelry store, buy beads, make necklaces and jewelry and go door to door in my neighborhood. And so I just felt like I loved the idea of creation and then having that end product end up in someone's hands. And so, I didn't really think much about what I wanted to do as a little kid. But as I got older and I fell in love with the craft of sewing, and tailoring garments to fit my body when I was, very thin and didn't fit into regular store-bought clothing. That's when I started going, okay, this is something I love. It gives me confidence. It's creative. It's exciting to see someone wearing your products. And that's when that seed, I would say, grew into like, maybe this is what I want to do. I don't know.
I bet you remember the first time you saw someone, even now. Do you remember the first time you saw someone wearing your product?
I do. I there were two signal times. One was at like a party and I saw the first ready to wear piece that we'd ever made. And I was like, oh my gosh, in the wild, you look stunning. For the bag, I was in Union Square and I ran up to a woman and she got so scared. She thought I was one of the crazy people in Union Square.
There's a lot of them, especially
There's a
more nowadays.
Yes. But I was like, that's my bag. And she clutched it to her body and she was like, it's my bag. And I was like, I know it's your bag, but I'm the designer behind it. And so that was a really exciting moment for me to see the bag in the wild.
You also mentioned at the beginning about that flea market and no one bought anything from you. And I'm a big believer that some of the most all the successful entrepreneurs that I've had a chance to interview are resilient. It seemed like you're going back to your 8 years old, right? And you remember no one bought anything from you. So what is it inside of you that gives you the ability to pick yourself off the mat and keep going?
Well, let's just say that as an entrepreneur, you better figure out how to pick yourself back up off the mat because it's going to happen again and again and again and again. You think you're going to get to this untouchable phase, and then that mat and your face hitting it is probably even harder when it happens. And I think entrepreneurs must have this relentless drive to get back up. And to me, I read about this in my book. Sometimes I think I'm still here, not because I'm better or smarter or have a certain skill set. It's just that I got back up. And there were a lot of people that said, this is too much. I'm tapping out. And I think that a lot of times can make a difference as you just keep innovating, keep trying, keep going back to it over and over again. And at some point, I truly believe you will find, some wind under those wings.
Yeah, it's incredible. I always wanted to do a podcast, but it's just impossible about all those people that didn't pick themselves off the mat that last time and probably were sitting on billion-dollar businesses if they've had. But yeah, obviously, you'll never know. But to your point, it's all about resiliency. I think it's also about innovation. Tell me about what was different when you were starting your business and how you were able to innovate to become so successful.
So I think that when it came to innovation, we started right at a time where social media was just beginning, blogs and forums were just starting, and we didn't have big funds to spend on magazine ads. And that truly was the only way you could get to your customer. There was no such thing as direct to consumer. So for us to come across a forum called the Purse Forum, where these women were talking about you all day, to me, it was a no brainer. It was like, let's talk to these women. They love my product. They want to order custom bags. And we got a lot of flack and a lot of heat for it. Many department stores thought we were being, lowly by talking to our customer. Magazine editors were like, you need to be in an ivory tower and be better than her. And my brother, who was my co-founder, we really just felt like the future was the consumer. And so in the beginning, innovation wasn't something that we sat around and had a strategy. It was how we were going to survive. And I think we've always approached innovation as like, now it's more like, okay, we know AI is coming. We know it's here. How will we use it? But back then it was like, oh, this is an unlock for us. This is helpful to us. And so it was more like, this is what we can use to grow and thrive, not some strategy for press or PR.
Yeah, it's so great. And just another great sign from you and probably for other entrepreneurs and business people to learn from, not listening to the old establishment, right? You could have been like, well, they're right. We'll wait for our article in Vogue or whatever it might be. And if you didn't do that and you didn't follow your gut, it seems like, and understand and innovate in that way, I would imagine, I couldn't imagine, I'm sure you would have gotten somewhere, but I couldn't imagine you would have been as successful as you have been with that company.
We wouldn't be here. We watched the other companies stay stagnant, not embrace social media, not embrace talking to their customer, not listening when the customer, overwhelmingly said, 2008, 2009, this is a recession. I can no longer afford your bags. And many people were like, sorry. And we were like, no, we're going to lower our prices and we're going to listen to you. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're still here is we keep listening, we keep learning and innovating as we can.
It really seems like you have as much passion as you did when you started out. And I want to get into it. Passion for your business, but so many other things you've done, like a book, your podcast, which we'll get into, the Female Founder Collective. It's pretty incredible to me. It seems like you're more than an entrepreneur and focused on your business. It really seems like you're more of someone out there as a thought leader, aside from just being successful in business. Why do you choose to do that?
A couple of reasons. I had so many experiences within my industry of women not supporting women. It's a little bit better now, but my sort of growing up in the industry was there's one editor in chief. There's one woman on top. There can only be one accessories designer. And I never believed that because I came up outside of this industry and I came up of the people. And for me, it was a point of like, how many billions of people on the world need a purse or a handbag or a shoe or a bag? Like, I think there's enough room for everybody. And I was dying and thirsty for camaraderie between women. And I was lonely in that space because it was hard to find. So I peered outside of my own industry and found that there was excitement around women connecting, about community, and about helping and support each other. And women in corporate America were facing their own challenges with the glass ceiling and pay inequality. And for me, it just was like, there needs to be some sort of support for women as a community, as an education platform, and as a resource for us to go, I don't know the answer. Google's not going to tell me, and I can't go back to school. So let me learn from a woman who's done it, So I co-founded it in 2018, similar to the time around the podcast where I was hosting these talks inside my office for my staff and then at my store. And that was great, but you only can reach 70 people at once. And I felt like, let me take this into a podcast format so we can, hit hundreds of thousands of people. And the only reason I was able to do that, because I know the next question is, well, how did you do all of that? Is we hired our first creative director at that time, which was my own long and hard journey to come to acceptance of I can't do it all. But to be able to go from, 18 direct reports down to one where I could still share my vision, my inspiration, I didn't need to decide this Pantone color black anymore, someone else could do that. And so that gave me the free time to be able to work on these other activities. And frankly, it gives, selfishly, it gives me energy. It's not just that I'm doing this for the good of women. I'm also fueled by it as well.
Exactly. So tell me or tell us a little bit about the Female Founder Collective. And then I want to get into your Superwoman podcast, because obviously, as you mentioned, it was an outgrowth of that. But tell me about starting it. And I know you kind of gave some reasons, and then just how it exploded as well.
It literally exploded overnight. I launched it in the only way I knew how at the time was like a slick campaign, launching it during Fashion Week. And I had a lot of support from the people at the time that created Fashion Week. And overnight, we had 3,000 applications on a static web page. That's all I knew how to
Wow.
do. We've since grown the community to over 25,000 female-founded companies. We've given out over six figures in grants. We've run accelerators and taught 50 companies how to raise. They've now gone on to raise $40 million. But the goal is truly that women need each other to connect, offer resources, and then the education platform that really my co-founder, Allie, ushered in, which was women teaching women. We want the founder of Honeypot, Beatrice Dixon, to tell you what it's like when you're about to exit and how you're going to approach that, because she just went through it. And she's not teaching that to someone who just started their company. She's teaching it to an appropriate audience, right? Or you have, the founder of, $1 million company teaching people that are smaller than her how she got there. So we're really making it by survey as specific and granular as possible to meet the needs of these businesses. So we have cohorts 4 times a year where it's themed around certain types of business. And then we have weekly, monthly, daily programming. And then we have 2 big hero events. One that's open to everybody, Female Founders Day, mark your calendars, March 13th in New York City. And then we have a smaller, more invite-only retreat for women who are doing 10 million plus.
That's awesome. Just in terms of being able to do all of those things and the idea behind it. I'm really curious, as you look now in 2025 and we look at the landscape for women, how much in your eyes, how much has changed for women if you look back to when maybe you were first starting out?
I think that the investment in women-owned companies is still where it was, 2%. I think corporate America has made some strides forward, but not enough. And I think that the solution that women are finding is I'm out, I'm starting my own business. So the only number I see growing is the amount of women starting businesses. And that's really exciting, but we have to be able to provide them with the education and support and community like we have at Female Founder Collective to succeed. My hope is that if these businesses succeed, these female-founded companies will pay their women better. They will support their communities more. They will give women the proper maternity leaves and or, lactation support, postpartum support they need. And that will have a ripple effect that I hope in the next decade is quantifiable.
Yeah, so do I, having two teenage daughters and also a wife who went through this back in the day prior to any changes. And when you talk about that and just feeding and with her babies at the time and them not understanding, like she had to run home real quickly and then jump back on the subway and like get back. And it was just such a boy's world, you know, and it's good to see that at least some of that has changed. I assume the podcast, as you mentioned, kind of was an outgrowth of the Female Founder Collective. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you talk about, who you interview.
I really wanted the podcast to sort of take a woman who you think has everything and she's figured it out. And you get to hear that story, but really, what are the hard parts and how, when her head's on the mat, how did she get back up? And so I interview all types of founders and entrepreneurs, um, whether it's Katie Couric to Bozoma St. John to Jessica Alba to Lizzie Mathis to women you've never heard of. There's a duo on the podcast, the McBride sisters, the largest Black-owned winery in the United States. To Beatrice Dixon from Honeypot, who just sold, I think, for over $500 million. So it's big and small. And, then every once in a while, because I have certain selfish interests, I'll have a hormone expert on there, who we're going to talk about her business and why she left emergency medicine to go do this. But there is a connection because women my age also are experiencing things that men might not go through with their bodies. And that does affect your work. It does affect your performance as an entrepreneur. So whenever I'm inserting and peppering in these like seemingly random other guests, there is a reason for it.
Well, I think it's great because I think you're also picking up people and being around the same age. I also realize that, especially my wife, she has struggled with that over the past 2 years. And you can see it's just incredible what she's going through and having to deal with. I mean, on so many levels that, obviously as a guy and not going through it, never understood, but she still, I love that you're doing that because she still picks herself up and she still works. And even if she has to look at the computer because her eyesight's even like from like an inch away. And I think it's great that you do have those topics. Are there any episodes, people you've interviewed that really resonated with you on a personal level and what you had gone through and kind of gave you new insight into your own being?
For sure. I call it the Gospel of Bozoma St. John because when this woman speaks, she should be a minister. Um, she's so soulful in how she approaches the world and business. And she's been through incredibly hard experiences. She was the CMO of Netflix, at Uber, and a host of other at Endeavor. And she hit up, she was like, I was a batter ram, in these glass ceilings, and the glass was not breaking. And I could either choose to keep, getting bruised or go start my own thing. And I think so many people could be a victim or approach it as failing. But she's like, no, that all taught me and gave me the tools that she has today, starting her own many companies. So I think it's women like her that continue to inspire me, or Dr. Taz, the hormone expert I mentioned. She went from emergency room medicine to being like, something is wrong. Women are not being served in our age group. And it's horrible that doctors have 1 month training on this and in 8 to 10 years of school. And it does affect your work and it does affect your ability to lead and it does affect your focus. So the fact that she's tackling that for women, I know someone that has been on this journey, like you mentioned with your wife, and 20 different doctors are telling her 20 different things, And so I like to know that I'm the destination for, I hope, a true answer.
You started your podcast 6 years ago, which most people might not understand, but that was like prehistoric times. Not a lot of people had podcasts or were starting podcasts. It was another innovative measure on your end. What made you start it, and what was your belief? Did you realize how big podcasting would get?
Well, I wish I had known how big it would get. I would have been a lot more aggressive with it. I would have tried to get my Joe Rogan figures. I really started it because of these conversations we were having in my store and in my office, where I would bring in the same women. I'd said, "Today, will you talk to my staff about your experiences so they're inspired? And then can we go to my store and do it for an audience there?" And that felt exciting and great. But again, it was so limited, and I didn't want to get the camera up and start live streaming. It just felt clunky. Um, and I just thought, you know what, these women should be heard, and they should be seen as examples and leaders. And if I have, a big megaphone, why not shine it on these women? And so that was kind of the genesis. My first 10 interviews were awful. Don't listen to them. I was reading from a script like this, you know, looking
Well,
up every once in a while. Thank God there was no video back then, because I was really scared. Um, and I had to figure it out on my own, like that. It was an annoying thing, but I remember my brother being like, "Nah, you can't use any company resources to launch this." And I was like, "All right, buddy, watch me. Watch me." Those things are annoying to hear, but they're such great lessons, and they turn you into getting good at something else. And so here we are 6 years later.
Amazing. It's an incredible podcast, and I I really understand. I remember when I was hosting Entrepreneurs How Success Happens, my first interview was with the chef Mark Forgione, and I literally just sat there and he just rambled for about like 35 minutes, and I didn't even ask a question or anything. And I remember telling the publisher, do not put this episode out there until like we're 10 deep. And finally did, and thank God for editing. But it's really interesting. What's what's next in terms for you? I mean, I can't say what's next because you do so many different things, but personally as a person and at your stage of the game right now where you've been super successful in so many things, what is it over the next couple of years that you would like to achieve, whether it's personal, whether it's business? What's most important to you right now?
I think that on the business side, we, during COVID, we lost around 70% of the business. We had a lot of partnerships and licenses that just for sheer survival just paused. The goal is to really build that back now that we're stable and growing again. And so it's exciting to think about reviving eyewear, belts, cold weather, kids, intimates, all these categories that kind of just like we had to put blinders on. Um, we as a company are celebrating 20 years next year. So I have a couple things I've cooked up, which you'll hear about in February. My book with added bonus chapter, is published in paperback in February 4th. So pre-order it now. But then we have two exciting collaborations happening. And so I really just want to hit everyone over the head with, like, we've been in business for 20 years. That's a really long time. There are a lot of brands that, started out with, a lot of money and flamed out very quickly. And so what does it mean to be a 20-year veteran? Um, and then for me personally, I love to work, but sometimes I still will find myself cultivating opportunities that I don't necessarily need to do, but it sounds fun. And I'm trying to say no to more of those opportunities and just focus on my family. I have 4 children. And so I added up how many days I was gone last year away from them, 3 months. And I said to myself, that's too long. That is unacceptable to me that I missed 3 months cumulatively over a year. And so next year I was like, all right, let's get it down to 2 months. How are we going to make this happen? And so, the goal will be celebrating 20 years and being more present in motherhood.
Yeah, congratulations. And first off, on the business side, for all those pets.coms out there and some of the others that flamed out. 20 years is pretty incredible. It's the telltale sign of, strongly built business, and one that has been successful and even has gotten more successful. On the personal side, I certainly understand that. I think it's something I've noticed, at least a lot of women, friends of mine who do have high powered positions or are major entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs have that same issue and that battle between family and business. And I always found that very difficult because on one end, you want to show your kids, right? Like, this is my mom, like and if I'm a girl or a boy, it's motivation, it's showing. And I battle with that, or my wife does, because she works. How hard is that? How do you handle that balance? I know you just mentioned you're kind of trying to spend more time, but it's still got to be an internal conflict for you.
It's huge because, my mom worked and again, it's not conscious at the time, that you're like, this is seeping in and it's going to do something later. You just are like when my mom told me she was going back to work full time and no longer doing these side businesses, I was devastated because she wasn't going to be home when I got home from school, and I remember crying about that. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, does it soak in? Do they realize it? Is it going to help them? I have to hope that my daughter, who's already like, I want to sell this and I want to develop that, like, that the seeds of that are happening. But I still think that can happen and I don't have to be gone as much.
It's good to see at least she wants to do that. Having two girls of my own who, yeah, it's a different day and age, at least in our house, from when I grew up. And I think for all children, but I think it is great, especially for girls, because I think of people like yourself and people who led the way and, formed, podcasts like you have and have done those things. Before I let you go, give us the title of the book again, when it's coming out in paperback, and also just talk a little bit about your podcast and where you can get that. Although we all know, I guess, you can go to Spotify and Apple, or anywhere else. But anyway, tell us about the book and the name and just when it's coming out again, and before we let you go.
Yeah, so the book is called Fearless: The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. It is available wherever you buy books. I'm urging women to support women-owned bookstores across the country for the purchase. If you don't want to do that, you can also go to Amazon. There is an added intro and a bonus chapter. I'm also going to be recording it on Audible, so it'll be out on Audible on February 4th. The podcast is Superwomen with Rebecca Minkoff. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts. And we have I've been doing this for 6 years. So there's probably 1,000 episodes of just great women, teaching, and hopefully you come away inspired.
That could be a really long binge, to go through every
For
single
sure.
one of those episodes.
For
But
sure.
I'm sure there will be people who will do it. But Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on Business Innovators. Always great to speak with you. Incredible success and even better perspective on the world and the world for many people nowadays, especially women, in terms of what they're dealing with, going through. And as I mentioned, someone who now has daughters and a wife going through similar issues in menopause and that time of her life, I can really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.